Welcome to Check Your Mailbox, a vote by mail webinar. We're delighted to have you with us today. We're going to be answering your questions, some of which you may already know, some of which you may not know. But let me just tell you who we're going to hear from today. First of all, my name is Raphael Sonenshein. I'm the Executive Director of the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs at the campus of Cal State Los Angeles. Our motto for the years we've been here is unleashing the power of participation. And if there's one thing we've learned about unleashing the power of participation is that the more information people have, the more likely they are to be able to participate. We are nonpartisan and dedicated to letting you know what you need to know in order to join in. And today we're going to be joined by two other heads of organizations that have the same mission. Dean Logan is the Registrar-Recorder and County Clerk who runs the elections in LA County. And Margo Reeg is the Vice President for Voter Services for Los Angeles County League of Women Voters. And you'll be hearing from both of them throughout this process. We're gonna have a really enjoyable opportunity to find out what's what. And honestly, I'm gonna find out things I don't know because this process is a complicated one. What we are in the middle of is a very unusual thing in California. It's a state recall election. More than 100 years ago, California's voters adopted a constitutional amendment in 1911 to create direct democracy in California, to allow the voters to hold their leaders accountable, both through the recall, removing a leader from public office, but also the initiative where the people make a law and the referendum where the people can remove and eliminate a law. The recall actually started in the city of Los Angeles in 1903. In the 1903 city charter adopted by the voters for the first time, the recall election appeared in American government. It spread widely throughout California, especially at the local level. And to this day, it is still a very popular tool in city council races and school board races. You see recall elections quite often. And in 1911, as I mentioned, California adopted the recall for state elections. However, it was not quite as popular a measure, even though it's doable to get on the ballot to remove someone from public office in California. Very, very few cases have occurred in that more than 110 years since this began. There were 179 attempts to recall state officials in California, but only 11 collected enough signatures to get on the ballot. And of those, only 6 were recalled. Of course, the most famous recall election in our lifetimes in 2003 was the recall of Governor Gray Davis, who was replaced, as you know, by Arnold Schwarzenegger on the replacement ballot. And that made history, became a global event. So the truth is we're living in history right now. But it's something that has been in the Constitution for 110 years. And it has a process that is important for you to know because you've been receiving things like this sample ballot that I got. I haven't gotten my full ballot yet, and we're going to ask the registrar what these documents are and how we should use them the best. When you receive your ballot, you will have 2 and only 2 decisions to make. This is not one of those ballots that's filled with hundreds of decisions for you to consider. And think of them as 2 separate decisions, as if they're measures on the ballot. The first one will ask, should the governor, Gavin Newsom, be recalled, removed from office? Yes or no? And just so you know, yes means you would remove the governor, no means you would oppose removing the governor. So if you want to keep the governor, you'd vote no. If you want to remove the governor, you vote yes. And then there's a separate measure on the ballot for replacement candidates. Now, those votes will all be counted. These are all candidates who followed a process to replace Governor Newsom if he is removed from office. That's why they're called replacement candidates. And the state constitution calls for this election to be held, these 2 decisions at the same time. We will count the ballots no matter what happens on the first question. But if the governor is removed, then the candidate with the most votes, a plurality, not a majority necessarily, would replace Governor Newsom. So you have the option to vote for both measures, to vote for the first and not the second and not the first, although, and I don't know why you would do this, you could vote for neither and mail in your absentee ballot. The reason we're focusing on absentee ballots or vote by mail ballots, has become one of the most dominant methods, especially in the Western states and here in California, for voting. In fact, in 2018, the last statewide election we held before the pandemic, 65.3% of all votes were cast by mail. As you know, the pandemic changed everything. And in 2020's presidential, national, and state elections, 86.7% of all votes were cast by mail. This is not going to go away. This is going to be at least the main way in which it's done. Our focus today is on one part of California, which is Los Angeles County. Now, look, California, LA is only 1 out of 58 counties. So why are we spending so much time on LA? Well, of course, because we're here, but also because 1 out of 4 Californians actually live in this one county. There are 22 million registered voters in the state of California, approximately, and 5.8 million of them are right here in Los Angeles County. The more we can get the word out about how to vote by mail in this recall, which is an election many people haven't even heard of until the last few days, the more we'll upgrade the level of participation throughout the state of California. So if you really want to turn around voter participation, this is the county where we can make the greatest impact. And that's why we are here today. In addition to the 2 organizations that are joining us today, the county's office of the Registrar-Recorder and the League of Women Voters, I also want to thank the Associated Students Incorporated of Cal State LA, who has been a great partner in outreach to our more than 22,000 students here at Cal State LA, and have collected a host of questions from them that we will be posing and mixing in with all the questions that we have here. I invite you also to put your questions into the chat, and we'll be monitoring that, and we'll try to get those questions to our panel as well. And right off the bat, someone is asking, on the replacement election, is it any size plurality, or would there be a second round for the top 2 contenders in the replacement election? There will be no second round. Whoever gets the most votes in that replacement election will be the next governor if the governor is recalled. That's not always the rule in LA city recall elections. There's a requirement for a majority runoff in the replacement campaign, but not in this case right here. So with no further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce a great friend of Cal State LA who's been in our campus very, very many times, who is the Registrar-Recorder and County Clerk of the County of Los Angeles, Dean Logan. And Dean, as you know, we're all going to be on a first name basis here, so it's still respectful to call you Dean, and consider you a friend and a colleague. Welcome to this webinar.
Thanks, Rafe. It's great to be here. And just let me start by thanking you and the Pat Brown Institute and Cal State LA for hosting the event today, but also for, as you say, for the longstanding friendship and partnership and the effort to unleash the power of participation. As you say, I've been on campus many times, and we've been great partners for events like National Voter Registration Day and similar activities for certainly well over a decade. So it's great to be here, and really appreciate the opportunity to dive into the unique elements of this particular election.
Well, thanks, Dean. And where I'm really going to ask you a lot about is literally what absentee voting is, how it works, because as you know, there's a lot of information floating around. Some of it is accurate, some of it is not so accurate. And then I had dinner with a friend of mine who's a very well-informed person just the other night, and he was a bit confused about how this whole thing works. So I'm going to run a set of questions by you. So this thing I held up first, my sample ballot. What is a sample ballot, and how is it different from a ballot? I mean, I can't mail this in, right? I can't do anything with this in particular.
Yeah, that's right. So the sample ballot, as you say, is just what the title implies. It's a sample ballot. It's intended under California election law to be the notice to voters that an election is coming up. So it contains a lot of information about voting, what you can anticipate as a voter in terms of the voting options, the dates and timelines for voting. It also includes a facsimile or an image of what the ballot will look like, so you know what to expect when the ballot comes. And it does have other sources of information. So if you want to request a ballot in another language, or if you need voting assistance, it has that information. So that really is sort of the kickoff of the election, is to notify the voters an election is coming up, what the election is entailing, and to provide a copy of the ballot for voters so they know what to expect.
So if I accidentally lose this sample ballot, nothing bad has happened to me. Is that right? In terms of my ability to vote?
That's correct. This is a resource for voters. It's not something that they need to, that they have to take with them to vote, or that they need to complete their vote by mail ballot, but it does provide a lot of helpful information for voters in preparing to vote.
Okay, well, that's very helpful because, I get the mail every day and I throw out about 3/4 of the stuff that comes to me. And then occasionally I see something that looks like it's from the government and it turns out it's an advertisement of some kind. Every voter in California is going to get a full ballot, correct? And I have a vote by mail ballot, every single one of us.
That's right. So every voter in the county, and as you say, in the state of California, is receiving their ballot by mail. This was a change that took place in 2020, heading into or in the midst of the pandemic, where the legislature authorized the distribution of ballots by mail. It's not your only option. You can still vote in person, and there are still safe options for doing that. But this ensures that, especially when in these kind of uncertain times with the pandemic, it ensures that every voter has the opportunity to receive a ballot in the mail, to mark that ballot and get it back to us in a timely manner to have their vote counted. So those ballots, when it started going in the mail last week, the final shipment hit the post office on Friday. So by later today or mid this week, all 5.8 million voters in LA County should be seeing those ballots in their mailboxes. The envelope looks like this. It does say official election mail on it.
Can you hold that up so we can see that really clearly?
Yeah,
that's the real deal, right?
That's the real deal. And inside here is your ballot itself and voting instructions, and that signals your ability to participate in this election.
Can you open that envelope for us? Because that's what we're going to do, is we're going to open our envelope, and I'm not going to know which stuff is just like junk and which stuff I really need.
Yeah,
no
there's
offense,
not. No. Well, first of all, I would point out there's information on the back of the envelope. So, again, instructions, ways to contact us, resources that are available for the voter. Inside, pretty simple for this election. There's a return envelope. This is what you will use to return your ballot. It's important that when you return your ballot that you sign this with your signature. That is the signature that we will use to validate your ballot. We will validate that signature against the voter registration signature that we have on file. A good kind of reference point for this is your signature on your driver's license is often the signature of record that we have for voter registration. So you want to be sure that your signature matches what's on your driver's license, and recognize that will be checked as a validation for your vote by mail ballot. The other thing that's in there is this packet. So you'll recognize this because it has the bright I voted sticker on it. This is a ballot wrap. So it's the first page is information, gives you the instructions on what's on the ballot, how to fill it out, how to return it, how to track your ballot. You can actually go online and get text messages or voicemails letting you know what's happening with your ballot. So there's a transparency element there as well. On the back of this sheet is a list of the drop-off locations that you can use to return your ballot. So we have 400 drop-off locations throughout LA County. This lists the 6 that are closest to your residence, and we can talk a little bit more about that later. And then, of course, this is the ballot itself. And as you indicated, Rafe, there are 2 questions on this ballot. The first question at the top is that yes or no question. Do you want to have the governor removed from office, yes or no? And then the second question is, if the recall of the governor is successful, so if more than 50% of the voters statewide approve the recall, then which of these candidates would you choose to replace the governor? And there are 46 candidates on this ballot. So it does continue over to the backside. You get one vote for that successor contest. Mark that with blue or black ink, fold it back up, put it in that return envelope, sign that, date it, and then return it to us, and you are good to go. Then you can put on that I voted sticker and encourage everybody else to participate.
All right, well, let's dig into this a bit. Do I have to pay for postage for this?
No, there is no postage required for returning the ballot. There are 3 methods of returning the ballot. One is to put it back in the mail, and as you indicate, no postage is required. If you return it by mail, you just need to be sure that it is returned and postmarked no later than Election Day, and in this case, that's September 14th. So we encourage voters to mark their ballots as soon as they're ready to vote, get them back in the mail. That gives us enough transit time to get them back in a timely manner. As long as they're postmarked by Election Day, on or before Election Day, and received within 7 days of the election, then they will be counted in the election. If you don't want to return through the mail, you can use one of those 400 drop boxes throughout the county. These are those bright yellow boxes that we have put throughout the community. Those are open now, and you can return your ballot there, no postage. And finally, once we open our vote centers, which is the in-person voting option, the 11 days leading, the 10 days leading up to Election Day and on Election Day, you can also walk your ballot into one of those vote centers. So maybe you don't want to vote in person, you want to mark the ballot at home, but you want to take it and physically deliver it to a vote center. That's an option as well. So multiple ways to get your ballot back to us. Just be sure that we have it in our possession or postmarked by Election Day.
Okay, so I sometimes don't follow directions very well. So suppose that I fill out the ballot in pencil instead of black and blue ink and I mail it in. What's going to happen to my ballot?
Well, the ink, what we will do is if the scanner cannot read your ballot, so if it comes across as blank, then we can review that and see if it has markings on the ballot. And as long as those are markings that we can determine voter intent, then we are able to address that during the canvass of the election. Pencil is probably going to come through, but our recommendation and the instructions are pretty specific about using blue or black ink to mark that ballot. What's important to note on this question, Rafe, is that once we verify the signature of the voter, the identity of the voter and the ballot are separated. That's what ensures everybody a secret ballot. So we don't have the ability to contact you about a specific error made on your ballot because that's been separated from the identification of you as the voter. Now, if there's a question about your signature, or if you return the ballot without a signature, then we do have the ability to reach out to you and give you the opportunity to correct that by getting us a signature that does match, or updating your signature, or signing if you forgot to sign the first time.
So what you're trying to say here, which I appreciate, is your goal is to get our vote to count. Your goal is not to catch us for doing something against the rules accidentally and keep us from voting. Voter intent is the #1 thing, right?
That's correct. California election law is very clear on that. It is that the system is designed to ensure that people can participate and have their voice heard. And so there are a number of provisions to give voters that chance to correct a mistake in terms of signing the ballot, and also our ability to review those to ensure that voter intent is captured correctly.
So, I don't really sign my name much anymore. I mean, you know how the world has changed. And sometimes I put Raphael Sonenshein, sometimes I put Raphael J. Sonenshein. And one of the folks listening in on this is asking, what if I stick an initial in and I don't use an initial on my driver's license, or vice versa? Is that going to cause my signature to be invalidated?
It shouldn't. So a variation in your name in terms of an initial or a full name, it should not impact it, as long as the signature itself matches the signature and the handwriting or penmanship of the signature that we have on record. And again, want to be sure you recognize that if that doesn't match, then we would contact you to update that signature and to give you the opportunity to cure that. during the post-election canvass period. That said, I think it's important to emphasize to everybody, because a lot of people don't believe that this happens, and it is a fact that every signature on every vote by mail ballot in California is verified before that vote can be counted. That's part of the security and the integrity of the vote by mail process. So when you sign that oath on that envelope, you want to take that seriously, and you want to think about the fact that that's going to be compared to the signature on your voter registration record.
And we're going to come back to that in a minute about what happens when the votes get in, but a couple of quick other things to ask you. Let's say that I'm a person who's kind of homebound and very concerned about the virus and doesn't like to leave the house, doesn't want to walk down the street, doesn't want to mail it. Can someone I trust deliver my absentee ballot either to a drop-in box or to a mailbox, or do I have to worry that that's going to get me in trouble somehow?
No, California, or no, you don't have to worry about that. Yes, you can have somebody else return your ballot. California election law does allow for the ballot to be returned by another party. It does, though, require that you as the voter sign that ballot. So what we always like to remind people from our office is that you as a voter control the security of your ballot. So if you're going to have somebody drop that at a drop box, drop it at a vote center or at a post office, you need to be sure that you're entrusting somebody who you know is going to return that ballot as you intended. Similarly, we like people to know that if somebody is soliciting to retrieve and return your ballot, you're under no obligation to surrender your ballot to someone else. You as the voter control that, but the law does allow you the flexibility of having somebody return it on your behalf.
So it's a thing to be aware of. Somebody may say, oh, I'll help you out. I'll be happy to help you out. You don't know them. You don't know their organization. Don't do it. But you're still free to make that decision.
That's correct. That's correct. And that's why we offer so many options to return your ballot, is we want to make that easy and accessible for voters, but we want to maintain the security and the integrity of the process as well.
Two quick questions before we open the ballots at your office. What if I lose my ballot? You know, look, I don't care if I threw out my sample ballot. You know, I got this thing about a trip to Maui that someone's offering me, and then I see the thing called the ballot and I say, it's nothing, and I toss it. Now I don't have my ballot. What do I do? And how quickly can I get some help here?
Yeah, so again, that's sort of the great thing about the vote by mail process and the hybrid nature of how we conduct elections in California is we have a significant on-ramp. Today is 29 days before Election Day, and those ballots are in the mail, and there's going to be that ramp up. And to your point, people are going to be hearing about this election increasingly as we get closer to Election Day. So if you've misplaced your ballot or you didn't receive it, for whatever reason, there's multiple options for you. You can go on our website or contact our office for a replacement ballot. We're happy to accommodate that. We would say if you're going to do that, we would say you want to do that up to the week before the election, so there's still time to mail out a ballot to you and for you to receive that and mark it. But we also, as I indicated earlier, still offer in-person voting options, and we offer those for the 10 days leading up to and then on Election Day. So we will have 253 locations in the county. You'll be receiving a postcard that gives you the locations closest to your residence. And if you misplaced or damaged or can't find your vote by mail ballot, you can go in and vote in person at those locations. And you can actually, if you're not registered to vote and you want to get registered to vote, you can go into one of those locations and register and vote in this election leading up to or on Election Day.
Thank you. So last thing before I turn it over to my conversation with Margo Reeg is this. People have heard all kinds of stuff about the way votes are counted, and I think they believe a lot of stuff that's probably not really true or worrisome. When my ballot goes into the mail, where does it go? Who opens it? How do they open it? And what do they do with those ballots?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because it's unfortunately there is a lot of misinformation and a lot of confusion. There's still a national dialogue going on about the 2020 election and how procedures are different from state to state. So I appreciate the opportunity to be very clear and provide clarity about what happens here in California. Those ballots, when they come back, when you put your ballot in the mail, in a drop box, or at a vote center, they come back directly to the registrar's office. They're in our custody and security that entire time. We check the signature. Once the signature is verified, as I mentioned earlier, then we separate the ballot that's inside that envelope from the identity of the voter. That provides you that secret ballot. Those ballots are then prepared for running through our scanners for tabulation purposes, and that process is actually happening on a regular basis leading up to election day. And then at 8 o'clock on election night, when the polls have closed, then we actually run the program that accumulates those vote totals, and we release those election results. Now, what's important for you as voters to know is that you can track that process. It's a very open and transparent process. It's open to public observation. In fact, at our vote by mail facility, processing facility in Pomona, we run live stream cameras on our website, so you can actually see what's happening in that process. And you can also sign up, as I mentioned earlier, through the Secretary of State's office for notifications through their ballot tracks program. So you actually will know that your signature was verified and that your ballot was moved forward to be counted. So we go to significant efforts to ensure the transparency and security of that process. And then again, election results are released shortly after the close of polls, after 8 o'clock on election night.
And when will we know you'll be able to report a large number of absentee ballots, because you'll be ready to count them or to report them when the polls close? Is that correct?
That's right. So typically those first results that we release shortly after 8 o'clock on election night, usually around 8:15, 8:20, those are representative of all of the ballots that have been returned typically up through Saturday before election day. So that weekend before election day. So they're a representative sample of the entire county of Los Angeles, but they aren't the full set of ballots, because of course we still have voters voting in person. We still have ballots that are coming through the mail that will be postmarked on time. And then we have ballots out there that are being updated with regard to signature issues and whatnot. So California and sometimes this is frustrating, but it's important for ensuring that every valid vote does get counted. California has a lengthy post-election canvass period that lasts for 30 days after the election, where we're still processing validly cast ballots, updating those election results, and then conducting audit activities to ensure the integrity of the process. And then ultimately, we will certify this election on October 14th at the county level, and then it'll go to the Secretary of State, who will certify statewide on October 22nd.
Last question asked by our good friend Joy Pikus. Suppose one of her friends has a question she can't answer. And by the way, I end up in the same. Is there a single phone number people can call that we can post on the chat and make sure everybody knows that number to get information?
Yeah, we can post. We will provide our 1-800 voter information number. By the way, that's in the sample ballot. So that's, again, one of the purposes of sample ballot is to provide you with that information. I would also really encourage people to bookmark and use our website, lavote.net, as a resource as well. There's a chat feature on there. Sometimes that's easier to get through than it is on the 800 number, depending on call volume. But absolutely, our 1-800 number, which is 800-815-2666, is available now and will be available through the election. It also has multilingual options. And if it's about the mechanics of casting your vote and tracking your ballot, that's your best source.
Last question, Dean. Do the drop boxes ever get so full that I can't put my ballot in, or do you empty them out pretty frequently?
We actually empty the vote by mail drop boxes on a daily basis leading up to election day. They are high capacity, so there shouldn't be an issue with that. But we want to ensure that we get those ballots back into our process as quickly as possible.
Well, I have to say, before I let you go for a moment and then bring you back, I really enjoyed using the drop box because I got the best of both worlds. I got to vote by mail, but I had the feeling I was going to the polls and voting, but I didn't have to stand in line.
Yeah, you're not alone in that. It's interesting. We were just talking about that here at the office this morning, that when we first introduced the drop boxes in the March 2020 election, we had, I think, roughly 300,000 ballots that were returned in that method. By November 2020, where we increased the number of those boxes, and of course we were under the impacts of the pandemic, 1.7 million voters returned their ballots at those drop boxes. So they're a very popular option. I think voters, just as you say, Rafe, I think they like that sense of that they're putting their ballot into a ballot box and that it's coming directly back to the registrar for processing. And
I will admit, I took a picture of myself and sent it to everybody I knew. So
it's a great way to encourage other people to vote.
Well, thank you for now, Dean. We'll be bringing you back up soon and with more questions. Thanks so far.
Thank you.
And now I would like to bring up Margo Reeg. Hello, Margo.
Hello.
So Margo is the Vice President for Voter Services of the Los Angeles County League of Women Voters, and welcome to the program. And I'm so grateful. In typical league fashion, you've already been answering some of the questions on the chat that we couldn't get to. So we have known the league forever. In the 10 years I've been at PBI, we've partnered with the league on almost everything, and I have just the highest regard for the league. How old is the League of Women Voters in this country, Margo?
The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 as a result of women earning and fighting for the right to vote. We will be 102 years old in February. And I've been a member of the League for 51 years.
Wow.
So kind of half of the history of the League.
So the League is an interesting organization because it's run by volunteers. Is that correct?
We are essentially all volunteers, and the LA League has, I think, 1 employee. The LA County League has none, and the State League has maybe 10.
Well, it's a remarkable organization and dedicated, as I know, to a nonpartisan informing of the public so that people will participate. And the League is only 9 years younger than the recall in the state of California. So quite a bit of heritage there. I'm going to get right into something, Margo, that I know people are still asking, even though I said it at the start, somehow it just seems so counterintuitive. If I vote no on the recall, I still get to vote for who would replace the governor, even though I voted not to replace the governor. Is that correct? I think people need to hear that numerous times to really believe that that's true.
That is very true. Your ballot will be counted no matter which question you vote on. If you vote yes on the recall, obviously you would want to choose a replacement. If you vote no on the recall, you still have the right to decide whom among the 46 candidates should be the replacement if the recall actually carries.
And let me reverse the question and say, if I vote yes on the recall, am I obligated to vote for a replacement candidate if I've decided that I think the governor should be removed from office?
You don't have to, but it is probably to your advantage to make a choice so that you are telling the public whom you think would make the best governor to replace Governor Newsom.
So the summary is I can vote for one measure, I can vote for two, or I could vote for whatever I want to do. The voter choice is very strong here. That
is very true. And you have the right to turn in a blank ballot. Some people like to make that protest gesture also.
I've also been asked whether people can write in a replacement candidate, and I believe only if that candidate is certified as a write-in candidate. Is that right?
You're allowed to write in anyone you want, but candidates who have not been certified through the registrar's office will not accumulate votes.
Okay. Well, now let's turn to some of the resources that the League helps us with understanding, which is I want to decide among the various candidates, say on the replacement ballot. I'd like to know more about the governor and the governor's performance, all to help me make a decision. What does the League offer to, I mean, if the registrar's job is to do the logistics of the voting, the League takes on an important role of helping us make an informed choice. How can I do that?
Our statewide resource is called votersedge.org. It is a resource that the State League of Women Voters has put together with an organization called MapLight. The League provides candidate information, which we solicit from the candidates by contacting them and asking them to fill out a profile of information about themselves and to answer League proposed questions They may post a photograph, they may post endorsements, they may post their educational background, their volunteer organizations, their professional background. And these profiles are located on the Voters Edge website. And MapLight provides campaign finance information so that you can find out who the donors are to these campaigns and how much money they have contributed. That information is obtained from the Fair Political Practices Commission reporting that each candidate is required to participate in. So in order to access Voters Edge, you go to votersedge.org. The page that comes up will ask you to enter your address and your zip code. But in this particular election, because everyone gets exactly the same ballot, just putting in your zip code and clicking Find My Ballot will bring up the Voters Edge ballot. It explains the what the election is about and allows you to look at all the candidates and compare them.
How many of the replacement candidates have provided information that so far would be helpful to the voters for evaluating them?
What I found most recently was that over half have already put information in. Mm-hmm. If you are interested in a candidate, there is a tool on the website that allows you to send an email to the candidate encouraging them to participate in Voters Edge so that you can learn more about them.
Mm-hmm. And is it complicated to figure out the finance stuff with candidates? I mean, for a person just wanting to learn where the money's coming from, are the names sometimes a little opaque as to what an organization is or a person who provided funding? Or
the league has been working on legislation along with Common Cause and various other organizations to try to make campaign finance information more transparent, to require that the two chief or three chief funders of an organization that calls itself People for Good Government or whatever they have chosen to name their organization, that the three top funders have their actual names associated with that organization. So over time, we have been working as hard as we can to get legislation passed to make this funding mechanism as transparent as possible. Sometimes not all those bills get passed, but over time we have been making progress in making campaign finance for both candidates and ballot measures as transparent as possible.
Margo, let me ask you a few questions about the rules. Is there a list of certified write-in candidates? Will the voters know that? And when would we know who the certified write-in candidates are, in case we want to make sure our write-in vote is counted?
At the moment, I don't have that resource, but I think Dean Logan has it at lavote.net.
Okay.
They are the ones who collect and verify the names of the write-in candidates. And at a walk-in vote center, there will be a printed list of all the certified write-in candidates.
Can Gavin Newsom apply to become a certified write-in candidate in the replacement ballot? I'm pretty sure not.
Yeah. No, that is a rule that says that the person being recalled cannot be listed as a candidate to run in the recall election.
Okay, so what's the league going to be doing the next couple of weeks while the ballots are all out there and while we're all thinking, what kind of activity are you going to be doing?
We have just in LA County 12 local leagues in addition to the county league. Local leagues work in their own local communities, from large communities as big as LA City to small communities such as Torrance or the beach cities of Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, and so forth. Those people will be posting tweets, they will be posting information on Facebook pages, they will be talking to people, encouraging them to use that vote by mail ballot or go to the polling places to cast their ballot. Our object is to impress on people that it's important to vote in this recall election. Every person's vote matters. And we want as many people as possible to get out there and actually cast their ballot as possible. There may be get out the vote activities in local communities. The County League is not hosting any big events, but we are encouraging people with materials to be well prepared to answer questions. We are open to being invited to come and speak either through a Zoom format or a live format at all kinds of organizations, local community organizations, social clubs, church organizations, to talk about how important this ballot measure is and how relatively simple it is to actually cast your vote and what the value is in every person voting.
Are you available to come speak at university classrooms, political science, high school government classes, et cetera? Does the league have people who will come to the schools?
The league does. Every chapter has voter service people who are well prepared to go out and talk in college and high school classrooms to help develop that sense of lifelong civic engagement, that to emphasize the value of participating in local, county, state, and national government.
Last question before I bring Dean back to join you and me in a conversation. With your role in the League of Women Voters, I have to imagine your friends think of you as somebody who they should go to if they don't know what the heck is going on. What kind of questions do you get from friends and colleagues about this recall election? Do you find people are pretty well informed, or are they asking a lot of the same questions we're asking here?
I have to confess that I have been out of state for the last 2 months, so I haven't really talked to too many people, but people want to know when their ballot's going to show up. They want to know what the election is all about. They want to know what's the safest way to vote, where their vote center is. And I am very frequently referring people to lavote.net as the go-to resource in LA County for the information that you need to find your vote center, find a drop box, and to request a ballot if you haven't received one. One thing Dean did not mention, which I think is a really exciting development, is that they have an interactive sample ballot on the lavote.net website. You can fill it out at home in front of your computer or on your phone, save it, and take that interactive sample ballot, if you've saved it on your phone, to a vote center if you like voting in person. The ballot marking device can read the QR code that's on your interactive sample ballot on your phone, bring up your choices to the screen, and then you can approve it, make sure that that's exactly what you wanted. If it's not exactly what you wanted, if you've changed your mind, you can change the choices that you've made, and then print your ballot. You have another opportunity to check it over again, and then touch cast ballot on the computer screen, and your paper ballot will be dropped into the sealed ballot box. So you have a lot of different ways to cast your vote in this election and make sure that your voice is heard, because it's really important that every person's voice is heard in this election.
Thank you, Margo. Dean, will you rejoin us? I'd like to have the three of us spend a little time on some questions. And some of these are questions that were submitted by the associated students at Cal State LA. I'm particularly interested in getting their questions answered. I want to follow up on a couple of things. What's the deadline by which we'll find out who are the certified write-in candidates?
Yeah, thanks for that. And we posted something in the chat on that. So the certified list of write-in candidates will be available on September 3rd. That's the day before the in-person voting period starts. That'll be posted on our website at lavote.net, as well as on the Secretary of State's website. And that list will also be made available at all of the in-person voting centers.
And another question that was posted, it has to do with the mail-in envelope listing address as registered in Los Angeles County, when directions do not ask for an address on the envelope and there really isn't room to write an address. Actually, I wondered about this last time when I got my ballot. There was an instruction that seemed a little ambiguous about what they were asking us to do.
Yeah, it has been a little ambiguous in the past. That location for you to write your address under your signature has been there before. That's not new. However, the envelope also has a barcode that already has your name and address information provided. And so, yes, so voters are asked to print their address underneath their signature. Failure to do that does not invalidate the ballot. And again, the voter's address is already printed on that envelope and embedded in that code. So, what we find is most voters do actually complete that form. It's right under the signature, and it does give instructions at that point to do that, but it does not invalidate your ballot if you fail to do that.
May I say, on behalf of the 5.8 million voters of Los Angeles, do we really need that to ask us to write our address in if it doesn't invalidate our ballot if we don't do it? Is it really helpful?
Well, I think that's a legislative construction question, right? So I think it's probably an outdated procedure that was based on vote by mail and absentee envelopes that didn't have that pre-printed on the ballot beforehand, and is a way for the voter to attest to the fact that they are registered at the address where the ballot was mailed. So I think it's probably just a matter of the legislation catching up with the modern day techniques that are used for vote by mail.
We have broken new legislative ground today. And I now remember that it bothered me in 2020. So we're going to work on this, guys. The three of us are going to take care of this. Now, a couple of student questions. This is one that I found kind of interesting along the line of addresses. I recently moved. How do I update my address? And now, given that my address today may be a little different than it was 3 weeks ago, what kind of complications could that create if I have moved?
Yeah, the best advice I would give on this question in this particular election, or in any election, is if you no longer live at the address where you were registered and where you received your sample ballot or your vote by mail ballot, you can go to any of the in-person vote centers and update your registration, get an updated ballot. Now, in most elections, that would be important for you to do because you want to be sure that you get the correct ballot style for your current address. In this election, it's a statewide ballot, and the questions are going to be the same regardless of where you're registered, as long as you're registered in California. But in the interest of updating your address and having the most current voter registration, the best way to do that would be to complete a new voter registration application online at a vote center or through the various methods that are available for voter registration, or again, to go in person to one of those vote centers during that 11-day voting period and update and get a new ballot.
But I can vote at the address using the address that I have as my registration, even though I just moved 4 days ago to a new place.
That is correct.
Okay, I think that's part of what the question is here. Now, Margo, I have a question for you also coming from a student, which is, why should I vote? Now, that's not a League of Women Voters question, nothing.
The League believes that people should vote to participate in the governmental process, to let the leaders know what your opinions are. If you have any opinion about Governor Newsom at all, then voting yes or no will express that opinion. If you care about who replaces him, then certainly you would want to choose a replacement. If you don't really care about who replaces him, then you can skip that part of the ballot and your ballot will still be counted. Voting is a way of participating in the civic community and becoming more involved in the process by which so many laws and ordinances are passed to regulate and your life and to provide services to you. If you're a college student, the majority of the funding for Cal State comes from the state government. The legislators vote on the budget. The legislators choose to determine the tuition level by voting. The legislators are involved in setting requirements. So it is in your best interest to get involved in the process by which those legislators and the governor are chosen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well said.
Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
No, I say well said. It just makes me appreciate the League of Women Voters. I think they're so clear on that message. And you know, any election where a registered voter has the opportunity to weigh in, it's important to do that because that's the foundation of our participatory form of government, regardless of what's on the ballot. It is your opportunity to have your voice heard and for there to be an even playing field in that.
Next question, I think I'm going to answer, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's actually two different questions. What happens if the governor is recalled? How many years does the governor serve in office? And what is the next, does the candidate fulfill a full term? The answer is no. That essentially, if the governor is recalled, once the election is certified, I would believe, the governor would be removed from office and replaced by the replacement. But that replacement would only hold the office until the governor's existing term runs out. And next year, there will be an election for governor, a traditional election where there'll be a primary in June and a general election in November. And the new governor would be inaugurated in January of the next year, unless I'm wrong, which means that whoever is the replacement would be governor for a little bit more than a year, but would of course be free to run in the general election in the next year. Is that what you would both agree with?
Spot on.
Exactly.
Spot on. So I'd like to go back to Dean with another student question because we started on this earlier on, but I have a quick one for you just to explain to everybody. When you say use any Dropbox, you mean any Dropbox in LA County, right?
Well, actually, that's an interesting
Yes, you're
question.
not.
So yes, obviously the preference is that you get that into a Dropbox in LA County because then it's going to come back directly to us. California state election law actually allows ballots to be received in any county, and then so if we receive a ballot for Orange County or San Bernardino County in one of our boxes or at one of our vote centers, we forward that immediately to those counties so that they can include that in their canvas during the election. And that happens throughout the state. So, I mean, if you do find yourself outside of the county within the state of California and you have your ballot with you on September 14th and you haven't yet voted it, then that is an option to either get it into the mail and have it postmarked or to drop it at a voting location somewhere in the state of California. Of course, the better option is to vote it as soon as you're ready when you get the ballot and get it returned to us early on in the process.
What about those of us who are serving overseas in the military? What provision is made to make sure that it's feasible for them to participate in this election?
Yeah, we actually maintain an active list of military members and overseas citizens who are out of the country, and especially in an election like this where it was sort of an unexpected election. And if you're outside of the country, you may not have known about this. And so there is a longer transit period for those ballots. Those ballots are actually put in the mail to those overseas addresses 45 days prior to the election. We also provide that information to them through email if they've provided us with an email address, and there is an option for them to download a remote accessible vote by mail ballot where they can print that out, mark it, and they can also print out the oath that would be on the envelope and return it to us in that manner. So we have an ongoing communication loop with our military and overseas citizens to ensure that they get the opportunity to participate as well.
That's great. As we conclude, I just remind you that we spend most of our time here in the university community, thinking about the young people coming along and sort of developing the habit of voting, because the voting is a habit. There will be quite a few people who will have turned 18 since the presidential election of 2020 for whom this kind of odd, unusual, kind of off the beaten path election may actually be their first time to cast a ballot. I wonder if you could each share a couple of thoughts for that 18-year-old about maybe not getting drawn into the notion that it's all complete lunacy and don't take it seriously, and sort of look at it as an opportunity. Dean, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's such a great point, and I think that the message I would send around that, and by the way, in California, you can pre-register to vote when you're 16 years old. 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register, and that puts them in the queue. So automatically, after their 18th birthday, they would receive that sample ballot, and they would receive that vote by mail ballot. So, as you say, many of those prospective voters who have turned 18 since the last election have received their sample ballot and their vote by mail ballot for the first time in this election. I guess my message would be one, that this isn't what every ballot looks like, but it is a good example of where you as a voter have a chance to do something that is historical. I mean, as you've indicated in the introduction, we haven't had a statewide recall election in California since 2003. It's actually a pretty strong civics lesson on the power of the vote, that this election came about from registered voters signing a petition calling for the election, and it's registered voters who will make the decision on whether or not the governor stays in office for the final year of his term. That's pretty powerful when you think about it. So I would just use that as an opportunity to convey to those first-time voters that you are now part of a very powerful body that allows you control over what happens in the government that serves you.
Margo, to that 18-year-old.
This is a great way to cast your first ballot, because the ballot is very simple. Yes, you want the governor to be recalled, or no, you think the governor is doing fine the way it is. And then you have the opportunity to research those candidates on Voter's Edge and in the state voter information guide, and decide which person you think would be a better replacement for the current governor, if you so choose. This is the start of a lifelong habit of voting. It's very sort of empowering to be able to have a voice in what's going on in your state and in your local government. And I really encourage every young person to get involved, to vote in statewide and local elections, because there are resources available to help you determine what to do, how to vote, and it helps you to figure out what some of the major issues are in the state.
That's a really interesting point you make, Margo, which is to sort of turn this odd election on its head. It's actually a very simple election, and maybe not a bad place to start one's lifetime of voting. Once you straighten out the thing about can you vote for both, and that's complicated. I'll admit that that's pretty complicated. But it's the smallest sample ballot I've ever gotten. I mean, in a certain sense, and I'm thinking, I just have to make one or two decisions. That's all. But making decisions is what this is all about. Is that this whole process, which has its flaws in the way the recall is designed, was designed more than 110 years ago to create a vehicle for the people to make decisions that regular governments really don't make. It's another level of public input. And it's, in that sense, it's not an opportunity to be missed. And I'd also say, to go back to where we started, if LA County participates, California will participate. The weight of LA County is so immense in California's population and voter registration that to give people here the tools they need, which our registrar and our league are doing such a great job of, and other organizations, media organizations that are weighing in with all kinds of things, we're all pulling together with one goal, is for the weight of the people of LA County to be felt in the body politic. And I thank you, Dean, and I thank you, Margo, and I thank all of you on this program who listened and sent in questions and talked to us. And let's just leave as the final message of this, it's really time to vote. And for the rest of you, be safe and well and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.